In 1942, Britain's Southern Railways faced a crisis so severe that defeat seemed a real possibility. It was mocked as the ugliest engine ever built, yet it became the backbone of resistance on the home front, hauling vital munitions and troops under constant threat. How did a machine born of austerity, derided for its looks, hold the line against invasion? The answer rewrites what we think we know about victory and the hidden heroes behind it. Blackouts swept across Britain's Southern Railways as the war pressed in, plunging yards and stations into a world of shadows where only the hiss of steam and the clang of couplings broke the silence. Southern Railways lines, stretching from London to the Channel ports, had once thrived on commuter traffic, electric trains whisking passengers to seaside towns. That balance vanished almost overnight. By 1945, freight made up 60% of all traffic on these rails, a reversal from the pre-war years when passenger services dominated. The change was more than a statistic. It was a daily struggle against chaos. Every siding, every stretch of track groaned under the weight of military demand. Munitions, tanks, fuel, and food piled up in sidings meant for holidaymakers' luggage. The threat of invasion was not a distant rumor. Luftwaffe raids battered the coast, and every train movement risked being caught in the open under the glare of enemy bombers. Blackout curtains shrouded station lamps, and crews learned to work by touch and memory, feeling their way through the maze of wagons and signals in pitch darkness. In the first year after Dunkirk, Southern staff ran 55 troop trains in a single evacuation, feeding 145,000 men in 8-hour shifts at Headcorn alone. No other British railway moved more soldiers in that crisis. Congestion became a way of life. Freight trains queued in the night, waiting for a clear path to the docks at Southampton or Portsmouth, where the next ship to the front waited for its cargo. Sidings once home to a handful of wagons now held thousands. By D-Day, Southern had extended its yards to hold more than 2,500 wagons at a time. The network was stretched to its limits, yet the demand only grew. In total, Southern Railway crews handled over 35,000 military freight trains and nearly 1,800 ambulance trains carrying more than 400,000 wounded. The men and women who kept these lines moving worked under relentless strain. 8-hour shifts often stretched longer as emergencies mounted. Blackout meant no light in the cab, just the dim glow from the firebox and the constant risk of missing a signal. Every move was a gamble, every delay a potential disaster. The Southern Railway was never designed for this kind of war, yet with the threat of invasion looming and every ton of supplies a matter of survival, the pressure to find new solutions grew impossible to ignore. Oliver Bulleid arrived at Southern Railway's Brighton Works with a reputation for tackling the impossible. Wartime, Britain demanded it. The government's rationing orders landed on his desk in 1941, spelling out the reality. Steel, copper, and brass were now counted in ounces, not tons. Skilled labor was vanishing to the front. Every rivet, every hour in the workshop had to be justified. The Ministry of Supply made clear that luxury was out. Southern Railway would get no new express engines, no gleaming passenger machines. The brief was blunt. Build a locomotive for the heaviest wartime freight and use as little material as possible. Bulleid studied the numbers. Southern's old goods engines were too light, too few, and too slow for the surging military traffic. The lines themselves could not take the weight of the big traditional freight locomotives used elsewhere. Bridges across the South Coast were built for lighter loads. Every design decision became a trade-off. Strength versus weight, power versus simplicity, speed versus safety. Copper, once standard for fireboxes, was now earmarked for munitions. Brass trim, polished domes, and ornate fittings were stripped from the drawing board. Even insulation, vital for steam efficiency, was rationed. Bulleid turned to flat steel panels, easier to cut and rivet, and glass fiber lagging, materials that could be found or improvised. He faced another challenge, the workforce itself. Many skilled boilermakers and fitters had been called up, leaving gaps in the workshops. The design had to be something that could be built quickly by whoever was left. Bulleid's solution was a locomotive that looked nothing like its predecessors. The casing would be boxy and slab-sided, with exposed wheels and motion. Every curve and flourish was sacrificed for speed of assembly and conservation of steel. The frame, boiler, and motion were all as light as possible without sacrificing hauling power. Bulleid's approach was radical, but it fit the moment. The Southern Railway's new engine would be built for one purpose: to move heavy wartime freight without wasting a single ounce of precious material or a single hour of scarce labor. Out of these constraints, a new kind of locomotive began to take shape, one that would soon become both a source of ridicule and a backbone of the war effort. The Q1 rolled out of Brighton Works in 1942. It was a machine that looked as if it had been built in a hurry, because it had 40 engines, each defined by flat steel panels, squared-off casings, and not a single ounce of brass or copper to spare. Every curve had been abandoned for straight lines and right angles. The wheels and motion gear stood exposed, framed by boxy cladding that looked more like a shipping crate than a locomotive. The design was a direct answer to wartime rationing. Flat panels were quicker to cut and rivet. Insulation used glass fiber lagging instead of scarce metals, and the whole engine weighed just 51 tons and 200 weight. That gave it an axle load of only 15 tons and 1,100 weight, light enough for almost every bridge and branch line on the Southern network. But under the skin, the Q1 was built for brute strength. Its tractive effort measured 32,500 pounds force, making it the most powerful 060 steam locomotive ever to run on British rails. It could pull a 1,000-ton train through blackout and bombardment, all while using less material and labor than any of its rivals. The press did not care about the numbers. Headlines called it the ugly duckling. Some went further and dubbed it Frankenstein, mocking its slab sides and bare bones finish. Railwaymen joked that it was the only engine that could frighten children standing on the platform, yet Oliver Bulleid was said to have tested his creation by riding on the tinder at speed, standing behind the cab as the Q1 thundered down the main line. It is a story repeated in railway lore, though never confirmed by official records. All the same, the Q1's appearance was a direct result of every wartime constraint. What others saw as ugly was, in fact, a blueprint for survival. Long lines of Q1s rumbled through the night, their slab-sided forms almost invisible under blackout. Dragging wagons packed with the raw material of survival. Munitions for the batteries at Dover. Fuel drums for the convoys gathering at Southampton. Crates of ammunition, spare engines, and tinned food, every load a target, every journey a risk. Freight trains sometimes stretched over 70 wagons. A Q1 developed 32,500 pounds of tractive effort, biting into the rails as it pulled 1,000 tons through the darkness. These engines became the backbone of military logistics, filling the gap left by older, lighter engines that could not handle the weight or the pace. Inside the cab, the reality was cramped. The space was barely enough for two men to stand side by side. The walls sweated with condensation, and the only warmth came from the firebox, which glowed red through the night. There was no room for comfort, no insulation to muffle the roar, no brass to polish, no extra fittings to catch the eye. The controls were basic, the seats thin steel. Crews worked by touch, hands numb from cold, eyes stinging from coal dust. Blackout rules meant no lamps. Drivers learned to read the rails by the rhythm of the engine and the faint glimmer of signal arms against the sky. Braking on heavy goods trains was always a challenge. The modest tinder brakes on the Q1 demanded skill and nerve, especially on steep gradients or when approaching crowded sidings. Yet the engine pulled reliably, night after night, through raids and bottlenecks. Anonymous footplate crews, many just boys pressed into service, hauled the nation's war effort forward, unseen and uncelebrated. Their endurance and the stubborn strength of the Q1 kept the southern arteries of Britain open when everything else threatened to grind to a halt. Today, the Q1's battered steel stands as proof that function can outlast fashion, and that necessity drives innovation even in crisis. As supply chains once again face a global test, the lesson endures. Strength often arrives in unexpected forms. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts about unsung engineering heroes below.